Well, I'm happy to be leading this very informative conversation about what it takes to make a company a great place to work, and specifically the benefits that you need to succeed. Of course, companies want to ensure that they have healthy moms and strong babies. And I think that this conversation will help companies ensure that they are doing just that. I want to introduce our fantastic panelists for this discussion. HELYNN Nilsson, People Consultant with Google, Tara MIKO Ballentine, the founder of the Kindred Hub, and also April Daniels HUSSAR, Managing Editor at Romper, a digital resource for parents. Ladies, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
So let's talk about the benefits that we need to succeed in the workplace. HELYNN, I'm going to start with you. What type of policies should women look for when they're thinking about a long-term career and potentially starting a family one day? I mean, from the get-go with that interview.
Yeah, it's a difficult space to navigate. I just want to hold space for that. You know, being potentially in an interview scenario, as you've suggested, or even as an employee, it's a careful and a sensitive topic. As a general statement, I think that women need to look for benefits and support from their employer that really supports them in all facets of life. When one starts a role, either entry level or, as we call them at Google, nooglers, kind of fresh into our ranks, that may not reflect your station in life, you know, as your career grows at that employer. And so definitely you need to look at policies and benefits that support you as you enter the door day one in orientation and as you grow your career for the long term at that employer. And then I'll just kind of double click more specifically, and this won't be a comprehensive list at all, but, you know, maternity leave would be amazing as a set aside leave and not kind of combined leave of personal leave and short-term disability. There are some of those factors in play, but you don't need to kind of dip into other forms of leave in order to have a baby. That should be a dedicated set aside leave. There should be wellness benefits as well. There are certain things that we experience as women and mothers, and we need to be supported in kind of all facets of that as well. So healthy wellness benefits, access to, you know, to therapy, to massages, to meditation apps, you name it. You know, as creative as a workplace can be, you know, those are the opportunities for women to fully experience kind of all of what that workplace has to contribute, and in turn be strong contributors, you know, right back.
And that may be things that you're not even thinking about initially when you start at that workplace. You know, if you're not ready to start your family yet, you may not have thought about that, but it should be something that you're thinking about if you think that might be the plan down the line.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, I want to go to you, Tara. Tell me a little bit about the Kindred Hub and the reason why you founded this.
So I'm actually going to dovetail off of HELYNN and what she's saying about, you know, all of these things you need to be looking for. But I think the problem is they're not readily available. You know, you really have to look and dig for them. And so I saw from my personal experience of being an entrepreneur and being a mom that there needs to be a better way. So I founded Kindred Hub, which is a certification that will highlight and celebrate companies that are doing all those things and offering all those things that HELYNN is saying. So like, I feel like we're really good at highlighting the external, you know, the external give, but what we don't talk about is the internal and how that's going to impact the employee and ultimately bringing their whole self to work. So the certification that I've created will allow employees, mom, to know what they're getting into bed with before they sign those papers, before they start day one. And honestly, that's good for everybody involved. And my goal is by setting this benchmark and the standard that does not exist, I'm hoping through social pressure, we can show that it's profitable to put your the people that make your company profitable first, allowing them to bring their whole self to work. So And it literally came out of me dropping my daughter off at preschool, and my daughter asking me about, mommy, where are you going today? And I'm like, I gotta go to work today, baby. I gotta go to work. And I'm whispering this. And what I want to say is, I'm going to work. And I love it. And I love being a mom, and I love going to work. And these two things can go together, but instead moms go to work and we pretend we're not moms, and we come home and we pretend we don't work. And that idea of work-life balance doesn't work. Something is always losing. And I believe that we can have work-life integration. So I'm not only passionate about the Kindred Hub and what we're doing with our first certification, Work-Life Visionary, but it is needed, and it is time, and the time is now. We cannot continue to have human casualty for profitability.
Work-life integration, that is so important. That's really kind of what this discussion is all about, how we can do a better job at that. You mentioned having programs that are good for everyone involved, and that really leads me to my next question, because these programs, these policies really can impact a mom or a family's overall health. And I want to talk a little bit more about that now. April, how do you think programs and policies can help improve the overall health of women and parents?
Oh, I mean, just tremendously. I think, one of the things that we're seeing with the pandemic is it's really highlighting how important good benefits and good companies are for families and for moms. 856,000 women left the workforce in September, and those weren't all moms, but that's still 4 times as many as men left. And one of the major factors in that exodus, and that's just in 1 month, is childcare, and flexibility is another major issue. So if you don't have support at work, forget about your career, you might not be able to work at all, and you might not be able to feed your kids or pay your rent. I think something like, over 65% of moms are co or primary breadwinners. And for Black women, it's higher than that. It's like 70% of Black moms are really responsible for bringing home the money. So we absolutely need workplaces that support us and that offer us flexibility and offer us understanding. And what the pandemic has done has just really shown a spotlight on a situation that has always existed and needs to get better.
Yeah, and something that we definitely need to focus on and continue to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
HELYNN, I want to ask you, with your work in HR background and in employment work, how do you believe that a company's policies and programs can help improve a family's overall health?
Yeah, listen, so, an employer's brand is something that, folks in the marketing department don't get to decide, in the sense that, corporate branding is related to corporate reputation. It is something that is a response and an outcome of policies, of what people think about working there, what people say about working there, word of mouth. Reputation is spread in different ways. The value proposition that company is presenting to the entire family. And so when you think about, overall impact on a family's wellness, let's just take a mother and a working mother. In this instance, that's the nucleus of the family. Working moms, or moms in general, really hold things together. And so, as a mom has a cold, the family has the flu. And so to support, a mother, and to have policies and benefits that support her in all that she's experiencing outside of the work place and inside of the workplace is extremely important. And so, the causal relationship is it's obvious, and I also think in the way that supporting a mom and her well-being and wellness in all facets of her life outside the job also has a causal relationship and impact on her productivity, in the job as well. And so, it's a win-win scenario, one, to listen to moms and women, because it impacts, you know, our everyday environment.
Yeah, definitely. Great answer. Employers should want to support and take care of those moms and parents every step of the way. Let's talk now to employees. What if you are thinking about starting a family? What's the first thing that you should do to learn about your internal company policies? You know, without maybe sounding an alarm, you know, many women say they don't want to be mommy tracked, but going back to our first question, it's very important to find out about those internal policies. So Tara, I'm gonna ask you about that. If a mom or a woman is thinking about starting a family, what should she do first?
I mean, I think that is a huge problem, is that as you're, you know, getting ready to start a family and you're trying to figure out what's available at work, you can put a target on your back, if you will, that you're thinking about this. And so unfortunately, when, you know, or women who want to be moms start asking these questions, it really, unfortunately, negatively impacts their career path, where alternatively for men, they actually see an increase in promotions and salary. And, you know, a man gets a high five and a thumbs up, and a woman is pushed out. So unfortunately, it's a slippery slope to actually start having that conversation with your employer. And instead of being seen as proactive and working with you, and this is a good thing, and, you know, family, because, you know, where we work, we bring our whole self. It's a part of our family. The opposite can happen. So, you know, again, that's kind of, therein lies the huge problem of how do we reverse that conversation? How do we see the mom as a positive? You know, moms are entrepreneurs every single day, juggling and highlighting and doing all this stuff. So unfortunately, I don't think there's a great answer for how you have that conversation. I think I would start by asking other women in the workforce that have had children and ask about their experience. I think you need to go to your coworkers before you potentially go to your boss.
Now, what about going though first to, I mean, someone like HELYNN in HR, finding out your company policies? You know, HELYNN, would you say that's maybe the most important first step before you even have that conversation with coworkers or your manager? You know, finding out the policies in place that are going to help me.
Yeah. You know, in any scenario, when you're considering, you know, work impact, it's helpful to do some homework and some due diligence and find out, you know, what you don't know, right? What to expect when you might be thinking about expecting. And so it's extremely important to understand what resources are available. It's a, you know, no judgment, confidential conversation that you'd have with HR, reviewed as trusted advisors. And so we have a duty and a responsibility to our employees not to, you know, run and, you know, tell their business, so to speak. And so, yeah, there are conversations, exploratory or informational conversations I have all the time with women and with fathers as well, expecting fathers or men who are thinking about expanding their home, their families. So it makes perfect sense. And then, you know, there are also self-service tools that folks can use in their job, where be it an employee handbook. Some of that information as a starter may be there. There are employer kind of intranet or you know, web-based access points where they can go in and look for information and just do some keyword searches. And then I would say, you know, either starting with a conversation with HR or starting that kind of search on your own and finishing up with HR is a great start.
April, anything that you would like to add to that for, you know, men or women thinking about starting their family, the first steps that they should take when it comes to their company's policies?
Yes, well, I mean, I absolutely love that we brought up men and fathers, because this is a conversation that absolutely men need to be having. It's it only goes so far for us to be having these conversations. We need dads and potential dads to care about this as much as we do. And I would also say it's important for women who are not parents also to be having these conversations. It's not something to just start thinking about once you flip the switch and kind of start thinking about having a family, or you find yourself about to have a family. And I think that one of the ways that people can kind of start these conversations generally is within a broader lens of work-life balance, of flexibility, of things that make life better for every employee and your entire team, whether or not they have kids. Everybody needs to be able to leave work for an emergency, or to, take time off to be a caregiver. That doesn't always mean being a parent. So if you look at the broader existence of work and life and home, if we can think about it as a holistic endeavor that everybody needs to buy into, then then I think there's more hope for progress.
And
I would just quickly add that there are some kind of green flags, so to speak, if you're kind of starting to think about the process and you're wondering what, how your company may approach the idea of you becoming a parent. If you have, is there a mother's room in your building? Not every city requires that you have, that a company has one. So that's a good thing to look for. If you're scrolling through your benefits and the benefits that are offered, and you see something in there that's about family planning or fertility, those are kind of like a notch above just the standard baseline benefits. If there's anything in there that's really inclusive, where it mentions looking into adoption, or sort of, there's some clues you can see that your company may, or a potential company may be caring a lot about this issue.
Yeah, all great points to bring up. Green flags. I like that. Just
Yeah.
additional points to keep in mind if you are starting to think about growing your family, things you may have not thought about before. Let's get back to, if you are someone who is pregnant or about to announce your pregnancy, and you find out your workplace doesn't have those policies in place to ensure that you have a safe and healthy pregnancy, or the kind of maternity leave that you may need to take, or, if you have a high risk pregnancy and you may be going to multiple doctor's appointments, where do you turn then? Helen, I'll steer that question toward you. What could that person do if they find out that they're not covered under their company's policies?
Yeah, that's a really interesting place to be in, and it really depends on a couple of things. I'm going to launch in as like problem solver, to be honest, but a couple of things where they can kind of influence from their seat. So if it's around the time, when there's, open enrollment, or it's within the plan year, just to be super specific, where things have been kind of locked in, then that's going to be fairly difficult. Depending on the size of the company and the size of the, I'll just say, constituency that may encounter this problem, there may be a strength in numbers play where they can influence, plan decisions or benefits decisions for the following plan year. There might also be a play where they can receive additive benefits in order to kind of bridge the gap. So I'm thinking of, a secondary kind of insurance. They may have to go on the private market in order to do that. But that's a conversation also about where the employer is falling short and where the employee has to bridge that gap, and whether that's a fair and equitable play based on someone's gender. I'm going into other uncharted territories and kind of bringing that up, but that would get an employer's attention. And although I mentioned strength in numbers, it only takes one. It really does. I had mentioned this in prior conversations, but because an employer doesn't offer it day one or day need, the day that you need it, doesn't mean that that's not within their purview or power to get it for you. And so I think an employee needs to feel empowered to, to ask for what they need and then work through that answer as a partner to solve fully for the employer and the employee as well. And so, just as an employee is experiencing something, when an employer was, discussing their benefits and the salesperson came by and and they were determining, what's the best package to offer employees, this may not have been something that they thought of either, right? Like, we're all kind of evolving to some degree on the spot. So, extend a little grace and space to understand, what you can do from your seat, what the employer is willing to do to kind of meet you halfway, I think is a great starting point.
Tara, anything to add to that? What potential parents could do if they find out that their companies don't have the policies in place that they're needing?
I would add that it's just really important to advocate for yourself. I think that we hear a lot about going through pregnancy and, the doctors and asking questions and advocating yourself from a medical perspective. I think it's really important to also realize you have to advocate yourself from an employment perspective. And to what HELYNN was saying, I think that, asking for I would rather ask for something than wonder, because if you didn't have it, then you still don't have it. But what if you could have it? And I think it's easier to advocate for yourself at the business place that you're at, which potentially you've worked there for a couple years, you've got some track record, they know the type of employee that you are. And so you've got some street credit behind you, if you will, as you're advocating for yourself, than trying to start over and go somewhere else. And, I think that is a huge thing about being a mom, in all aspects is your best defense is yourself. Like, be your own advocate, be your own fan, and believe in yourself. I think that is one of the biggest things that as you step into being a mom, that's that unsung hero cape that you have to put on, and it's an additional part of your role that you're going to receive.
April, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that cape, whether we want it or not, please take my cape. No, you gotta have it. Doing research is also something that you start doing as soon as you think about becoming a parent or through the whole process. And I think that skill can come into be really helpful and come into play here. If you come to HR, why not talk to some friends who maybe have a great policy at the company where they work, or there's a whole extra vendor that their company works with that does family planning and fertility options. Bring them some potential resources. Solutions, ready-made solutions can be a helpful thing to have in your back pocket as a conversation starter.
Just to recap for those watching at home, very important from the get-go, maybe day one of your job, to look at the benefits, what kind of support will you get at this company, also how you will be able to implement that work-life integration, and that corporate reputation can come from its policies and programs. So employers really should be paying close attention to what kind of programs they have in place. And also the importance of bringing dads into the conversation as well, and that they are being included when it comes to those policies and programs. And again, just making sure that the policies in place, do your research, and advocate for yourself. That is so important. Ladies, thank you so much for your participation, your insight, and making this such an informative conversation. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
This was fun.
Well, let's continue our discussion on, so you say you're a great place to work, and in this part, we'll go beyond policy. We've got three powerhouse women joining us for this panel today. DEBRA DIBBLE Boone, owner and CEO of Staffing Equity Enhancers. Also, Katie Dye, a principal in retail and consumer products at Deloitte. And RHONDA MEDLIN, senior manager of information technology at Advanced Micro Devices. Ladies, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Happy to start this conversation with you and especially get all of your insight on this topic. First of all, we're going to start off when thinking about how to support your employees. So from the management standpoint, how to support your employees' health and wellness. Why is it so important to look beyond just the policy of a company? You know, it involves so much more than that. Katie, I'm going to start with you on that question.
Yeah, I think it's really about the culture that you're setting, right? So it's not just about the policy and making sure that people actually take advantage of the policy, which I think is sometimes something that people have to grapple with on its own. But also, how are you just creating that environment in which people can be themselves at work, right? And none of us are just 100% a worker or 100% a parent. And so how do you create the space for people to be able to raise issues, for people to be able to take care of the needs that they have at home while still being able to take care of what they have at work, and making sure that culture of being able to be supportive and of, I'd say people just really feeling comfortable being themselves is really, really important in order to get people to not only perform well, but also I think feel comfortable building a career with you.
So true. Can you give us any examples of that on how to help enhance that company culture and create that environment where people are comfortable?
I mean, I think part of it starts with leaders being themselves, right? And leaders sharing their stories. So when, I have challenges with my, now 3-year-old, she just turned 3 last week, and she's coming crashing in this door behind me on Zoom, or I need to take a little bit of personal time off to take a kid to a doctor's appointment. I'm very open with my team that those are the things that I'm doing. And I think it's important for all of us to sort of show up as whole people and not just as leaders, because that sort of sets the tone from the top. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do, but really wouldn't underestimate just having leadership model the behavior that they want their teams to have versus just sort of, again, relying on policies and things like that to do the work for you.
Yeah, I love that. RHONDA, you manage a large team at AMD. So what can you add to that and how you can help with that company culture and go beyond just the policy that's set?
Yeah, and I totally agree with what Katie says, is that you have to lead by example. And I think when you get to know your employees and understand what challenges they have or what opportunities you can give them to help them with their situation, I feel at AMD, I feel very empowered to adjust schedules, to change things. When the whole COVID thing started, I had 2 individuals that were 12 weeks pregnant, and their big concern was the unknown. Right. And so before any policies were laid out at AMD or any, really even from the media, things were decided, I let them know, rest assured, you do not need to come back into the office until after you have your baby or to when you feel it's safe. And I think our culture allows us as managers to make those decisions on the fly, not wait for policy, not wait for approval.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. As someone that was pregnant and gave birth during the pandemic, I can definitely appreciate that. And I'm sure that those employees really appreciated you doing that. And Deborah, now let's go beyond even that. You have worked during your career and especially now in the business that you started and helping companies to diversify, working to ensure that they have diverse policies, that there's equal opportunities for women and minorities. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I do believe and I don't have children, but I'm speaking from the place of caring about people. And from an executive management level. So it is my hope that managers will also listen to this very important broadcast and recognize that whether you have children or not, it's important that management embrace people, because people are the mechanism that actually execute the business strategies that make your company successful. So as I was a manager, my thought was to make sure that the people that I hired were comfortable with the culture, and that me being a manager also would set a wonderful culture, a culture that embraced individuals that wanted to have children or that had children. Because, we look a lot at benefits and pay, but those things are not sustaining if you're not in a happy or a comfortable work environment, if that culture does not bring about well-being. Because one of my Angelo's favorite quotes for me is that I've learned that people will forget what you say, people will forget what you do, but people will forget what you say, they will forget what you do, but they will never forget how you make them feel. So it is very important that management creates a culture that make employees feel happy about being there, that makes them excited about coming to work and not dreading leaving their children and not being able to be there for them if they call in the middle of the day. So we as managers must make it comfortable for those individuals that come to work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think so many people could agree with that. Of course, so much more than just about benefits and pay. It's really about how you as an employer make your employees feel all the time. Let's go back now to, Rhonda, you brought up you had a couple employees who were pregnant and of course very concerned during the COVID pandemic coming to light. Go back further in their pregnancies. And announcing that, I imagine that you were probably someone that they felt that very comfortable going to. But unfortunately, oftentimes pregnancy can be kind of a taboo subject in the workplace, and women have some hesitations for coming forward and making that announcement. Why do you think that is? Katie, I'm actually going to ask you that question. Why do you think that might have some stigma to it for working women?
I think, I go back decades in the electronics industry, which was a very male-dominated industry back when I started in the late 70s, early 80s. Today, I work for a company that's led by a woman. So, some great progress there. But I remember early in my management career interviewing somebody, and I interviewed with a male counterpart, and we both looked at the candidate. She was very qualified, but his comment was, well, she has 3 children. I don't think she'll be reliable. Mm-hmm. And my comment back to him was, she has 3 children. She needs to work. I said, she needs to support her family. And again, decades ago, it was very different. Today, when these 2 individuals actually announced their pregnancies, it was with excitement, and they wanted to wait until just the right time. The funny part is they were due on the very exact same day, and they both told me one day apart, early in their pregnancies, and they wanted to keep it a secret from the whole team so they could make a team announcement. And we did in my staff meeting, the first 15 minutes of my staff meeting one day, one wanted to announce it, and the other, they didn't know about the other. So when it came out, it was a big party and something to celebrate, and a totally different atmosphere today, I think, than there was, back a few decades ago. When I had my children, I came back to work fairly quickly. I did work for AMD when I had them, and AMD, even back then, even though the times were different, they were very accommodating. I worked with a global company. You work with global people, so it was not unusual to have a call at night. And they were very accommodating. I would leave sometimes early to catch my kids when they were small so they could catch a play or whatever they were in at school. So I was very able to enjoy all of their school things while still growing my career.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'm glad that you have seen that change over the years, and it is something that should be celebrated. But again, unfortunately, sometimes women just don't feel fully comfortable making that announcement. Katie, why do you think that is?
I mean, I think it's a combination of things. I think there's certainly are people going to think I'm less dedicated and that I'm going to take a step back, or I want to slow down my career. In the consulting world, we're fortunate enough to have a sort of a variety of different types of roles that you can take and be in and out of client service and things like that. And I think sometimes folks think that that's, are you somehow throttling back? That means that you're going to put yourself on a longer timeline. And frankly, I'm hearing that from men and women as well, right? And I think that's partially, Deloitte has really fantastic parental leave policies, including 4 months of paternity leave. So my most recent conversations, a lot have been with men around taking their paternity leave and should they take the whole thing or not, and could that slow down their career? And I think we're on a journey, right? I think we're in a good place with women taking that time, but I think there's just this perception piece. So to the extent that we can continue to, I think, lead by example, make sure that you're showing and celebrating folks' successes and folks' family wins, in addition to their personal wins, I think that's good. I think the other challenge that I see a lot, especially with when I'm talking to women who are thinking about starting a family or very early in that sort of process, they also have fears about, well, what if I have a hard time getting pregnant? What if I have challenges with the pregnancy? What's going to happen, right? And I think, again, creating that culture where people feel safe surfacing those fears and having those discussions is really important. And there's not really a lot that you can do to prevent necessarily those things, right? Hopefully March of Dimes can continue their fantastic research efforts and things like that to help in those areas. But I think creating a culture of support and one of understanding, it helps us to go a long way. But there's still that mental barrier that I think people need help getting over sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said creating that company culture, that it all goes back to that, just the way we started off this conversation. Deborah, I want to ask you, do you have anything else to add to that on how the discussion around pregnancy and starting a family can be improved in the workplace?
Yes, I do. I believe that the culture is driven by upper management. It's initiated by upper management, but it's embraced by everyone as a whole. And I believe that upper management needs to be aware of the changes, of the transition, of the shifts that validate the family dynamics, and that not only are the ladies or the females excited about beginning a family, but also there are fathers who are employed that are excited about beginning a family or extending their family, and they feel as much responsibility. I have seen that shift, and I think it is a beautiful shift. It's a positive shift. In spite of those still gender biases that if you're a mother, that there's a barrier to meeting the demands of the professional role. And I have an example. When I started to work many, many years ago, I was single and I was employed by a major oil and gas company. And my career was it was moving and it was on the incline. Once I got married, I could tell that they were not sure if I was going to begin planning a family. So I think it's important that you have those discussions with, first of all, your significant other or your spouse or whoever you're planning to have that child with, that you have that discussion with them first, and that you should be comfortable with being open about, yes, I do plan to have children. I wanted to have children. I did not, but I was also penalized, I will call it, for not having children in this oil and gas company. My raises were lower, and initially I felt like they were lower because of my ethnicity. But I was told, and this was in the early 80s, I was told, well, a junior engineer was paid more than I was because he had 3 children. I had no children. His wife didn't work, and my husband did work. Now, that was not a tasteful place for me. And so I could make the decision to stay there or to pursue another career. So you have a choice. I want women to know that they have a choice, and I want men to know that they have a choice. So I chose. I didn't leave immediately, but I knew that that was not the right work culture for me.
Mhm.
So we can choose. We are not stuck in a situation that is not optimal for you and your choices of family.
Yeah, very great reminder. Rhonda, I want to ask you what advice you would give to men and women who are thinking about starting a family or who are starting a family, who want to be outstanding parents, but still outstanding professionals.
Yeah, I think, work-life balance is really important, and work-life balance means something different to everybody. So I think you need to understand for yourself what it is you need in terms of how much you balance it during the day, during the evening. Again, I work for a global company, so I've had the luxury of being able to do some flex time. If that's what you need, I think talk openly to your manager. I highly encourage, even if someone else around you is not in a situation, so you have no example, speak up for yourself. Talk about what you need for your family.
Yeah, we talked in one of our other panels about not only work-life balance, but work-life integration. And I think that kind of goes along with it. It's not only about finding the balance, but really how those two can work together in the best way possible for you. Katie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more about that integration piece. And I think right now with a lot of us working remotely due to COVID, I think you're seeing that even more so than ever before. And I hope that is one trend that comes out of this that continues, right? Which is that I think we're all actually seeing each other as sort of full humans living in our lives, right? Not just at the office, but I think for me the big advice that I got that I would give forward is everyone has a different definition of how it's going to work for them. And I think when I was about to have my first child, I looked across the women that I worked with and I said, well, none of them feel exactly right. Right. And it wasn't because they weren't doing it well or they weren't integrating their lives well, but it just wasn't perfect for me. And I think what I had to realize is, it's best to sort of understand a lot of people's stories and take the pieces from each of those stories and put them together to see what was going to work for you, and to stop sort of assuming that there are like 4 different molds that you can fit into, pick your mold. And I think that it empowered me to be able to I think speak up for what I thought I needed, to be able to advocate for the direction that I wanted to go in my career, and put a little bit of pressure off of me to compare myself to everyone else. So I think just talking to people, understanding how they've navigated, understanding their stories helps you to self-reflect and understand what might work best for you.
Yeah, great advice. Deborah, do you have any words of advice on the management side, how employers can make sure that their employees are finding that work-life balance, that work-life integration that works for them?
Well, I'd first like to say that I co-sign what Katie just said, that because we are different, you've got to choose what works best for you. In my early career, I was mimicking what I thought was looking right for someone else and trying to incorporate or implement that same for me, but I found out it didn't work. So please know thine own self. Mm-hmm. And the place that you work, just make sure that that they are caring. Diversity is important because we are not the same. We don't think the same, and what drives our happiness is also different. And happiness is balance, and it changes, it shifts. But I think that because we spend most of our day, we spend most of our week at that job or interacting, and in this new COVID environment, we don't necessarily see each other every day, but we are interacting with each other in some way or another. So I think that it's really important that we know what brings us happiness. And as a manager, that we recognize some of the things that will provide happiness for our employees, because it's that happiness that drives productivity. And it's the productivity that drives the economic stability and gain. So that's what you really are looking for as a manager. You know, it cannot be selfish. It cannot just be about economic gain, but it must be about the sustaining employees, and it's a family. I mean, I am a real touchy-feely person, and that's why I talk a lot about embracing and loving and happiness. But I think without the hard part, it's going to be a hard part. So
that without the heart, it's going to be hard. And Rhonda, I'm sure you can agree with that, you know, and I'm sure your employees that work with you would say that that's the kind of manager you are, and that you have just seen that that's an important part of managing a team, is making sure that the employee is happy to ensure their success.
Yeah, I talk a lot with my team about, you know, a happy person is a productive person, right? Both at home and at work. So I fully align with that. I always also talk about compensation is not all about dollars and cents. There are so many other things. And I would encourage people, when you're either interviewing for a job or even making a job switch within your own company, you know, you interview them for that culture. Right. You know what you need. You ask for it. You ask, how is that taken in that group? Be your own advocate. I think that, you know, speaking up for oneself. I know, Deborah, you talked about mimicking. I have trained a lot of managers in my day, and I currently am training one manager who was new to managing, and her original thought was she loved the way I managed, and she tried to mimic it, and it didn't work for her. So I coached her in telling her, take the pieces that work. And today she's an amazing manager in her own way. I mean, I've just seen her blossom, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. A lot of potential managers could probably learn something from that. Katie, anything else to add?
I mean, I think the other thing I would just add, especially from a management perspective, is that I think you've got to walk the talk, right? So when something happens, and whether it's, you know, something happens during someone's pregnancy, something happens when, you know, with their child, or whatever the right thing is, but when something happens, it's important that you have their back, and that you sort of scramble the jets and make sure that person can go take care of that business, right? And I think that not only shows that person your commitment to them, but it shows everyone else, you know, in the organization, that that's how the organization responds to moments of crisis, you know. And I think, you know, I've gone through that personally, like with my second daughter, or my daughter, who is my second child, was born at 27 weeks. So she was super, super early. And when I was at 26 weeks in my pregnancy, I had to go on bed rest, and, like, you know, just, it was like pull the ripcord one day, you're not at work anymore. Right. And the way that people swarmed it and just took care of it so that I didn't have to care, right? I didn't have to care about work. I didn't have to worry, was like 100% to me. Right. It was like, you could have given me a ton of money, but I would have preferred that feeling. Right. And so I think, you know, that was something that made me feel good. But I think if, you know, we can have the policies, we can talk about wanting people to be happy at work, but if we don't go out of our way to just walk the talk, right, then it kind of like lands flat. And I think there's really opportunities to do that all the time, whether it's a big crisis or a little one. I think it's important.
Yeah,
I totally agree with Katie. One of the sayings we have is, you join a company, you leave a manager. Mm-hmm. And so I think that leading by example is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I also would like to say that you as an individual have a responsibility. We get to choose. I talked about choice. There's a choice. And before you choose, if you are looking for a job, before you choose, I just recommend that you research and review external communication of that company to see if they're saying good things about their employees that actually celebrate them, or if they are doing work in the community, like their employees are working through the school system, doing some mentoring, if they're involved in charitable organizations, that they're doing they're sponsoring charitable events. That says a lot about the company, because when you're sitting in that interview, you're going to see the face of what they want you to see. But it is our responsibility when we're looking for jobs to look for those little things that you can do research on. It pays out. And if you're in a job and that you're not happy with, be patient and patiently look for something outside of that job. Leaving a job just out of frustration or anger is just going to land you somewhere with that same, you're going to carry that same level of frustration and anger and disappointment to another job, and it still won't be successful. And that's the piece that I really, really want to share today, is know yourself and know what's important for you.
All great advice and things to keep in mind. Just to recap our great conversation, it's all about the culture of the company and developing that company culture and that positive environment, leaders being themselves, sharing their stories with their employees, and lifting up their employees and making sure that they know that they're supported, leading by example, which again goes back to that company culture. Also, for those employees, finding that work-life balance or integration that works best for you, not for other people, but what's best for you. Of course, a diverse workplace is so important, and without heart, it's going to be hard. And then again, just the importance of choice and doing your research, making the best choice for you and the best fit for you in finding that perfect balance of being a parent and also a professional, which is what this discussion is all about. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us for this discussion on So You Say You're a Great Place to Work. The whole purpose of this conversation is to help improve company culture, especially when it comes to working parents. We hope that you're walking away from this with some insight from our panelists, and we will be continuing this workplace conversation in our Leading with Empathy panel on Monday, November 16th. In the meantime, you can check out the March of Dimes website. March of Dimes is here to support moms and ensure strong moms and healthy babies, and you can check out their website for a lot more resources and information.